Every successful person got there by going through tough times. Success is a hard-ass teacher who likes to knock you around along that journey. You know, it takes real guts to not give up and keep going. We'll hear stories about failures and how these leaders flip the script to create success. I'm John Schultz. Join me and let's discover how success is never really overnight. So I want to welcome everyone to the first episode of the Upset Podcast, which I'm so happy to be here and so happy that I took the time to create this new show. I started this show, I'm fascinated about people. And in my career, I've learned more from other people on how it directed me and where my direction ended up being than anything else I could actually think of. So creating this is just something that is going to continue on my life learning process and hopefully share as much as I can possibly share with whoever watches this show. And hopefully it's a lot of people. Why Brandon Steiner? Why was he my first guest? Well, he's a legend. He's someone that I've gotten to know over several years. And he's just one of those guys that to me is unique and has so many attributes that people can learn from. So I want to welcome Brandon Steiner. I want to talk to you a little bit about, what he is and what he's about. He founded Steiner Sports and then sold it recently in 2019. But then, like he always does, he opened up the Steiner Agency and the CollectibleXchange. He's also founder of Athlete Direct, connecting an athlete's sports and merchandise direct to the consumer. He's authored 3 books. I don't know if this person, Brandon, ever sleeps, but he's authored 3 books. One is The Business Playbook. One is You Gotta Have Balls, which is my favorite book. It's how a kid from Brooklyn started from scratch, bought Yankee Stadium, and created a sports empire. And then his next one was Living on Purpose, which obviously is something we all need to learn. He's a guest lecturer at places like Columbia, Yale, and Harvard Business School, as well as Fortune 500 companies. Grew up in Brooklyn and went to Syracuse, which is my alma mater as well. We love Syracuse, go Orange. And he started out in the hospitality business, which is an interesting way to start a career. So welcome, Brandon. We're so happy that you are taking the time to be here.
Well, Jonathan, thanks for having me. And I just got to say, this is a perfect platform for you. You are the most curious person I've ever met. And to share your curiosity with an audience, which is what this is all about. And I will say that this will be a tremendous learning experience, as it's supposed to be. But the main thing you offer is the relationships and contacts you have are probably second to none. So the audience probably needs to strap themselves in, get ready, because I can't imagine the list of guests you're going to have. And I think you know how to ask the appropriate questions, which is key. Not having the answers, but having the right questions, which your curiosity level is off the charts. So that's what intrigued me about you right out of the gate. And I think that's what's going to make this pod series amazing.
Well, thank you. Appreciate that. Yes, curiosity for me has always been my number one character trait, sometimes to a fault and sometimes to a very positive situation. But so what I'd like to do, everyone has a story. And again, I'm doing this also. I so enjoy people's stories. To me, it's what makes, my life tick. So I want to start way back, where you're from, how did you become such a sports fanatic? Give me something about that on you.
I mean, it's interesting. Like sports was kind of like a crutch for me. I had a learning disability as a kid. School was really difficult. As much as I wanted to do well in school, it was a struggle. The schoolyard was my friend. That was my place where it was a haven to go compete. Play a lot of sports, which, I hung out with a group of guys that I still talk to this day, 50 years later, and we break every sport down, every game down. And so it was really, we were really fanatical about our sports. Never did I ever think that this was going to end up turning into a business perspective, but I was always an entrepreneur though. I always had an entrepreneurial spirit. I was the weird kid in the neighborhood. Mainly that starts from just being, I grew up in a very, very poor home, broken home. We lived over at Glock Kosher Butcher, 539 Kings Highway. And Glock Kosher is where they kill the chickens in the butcher shop. So I woke up every morning, just cutting chickens' heads off. And, I always say I had heat in the summer and air conditioning in the winter. Things were tough. So at 10 years old, Jonathan, it was sports and business for me. I was working because we needed the money, and I was hungry, and I didn't have clothing. So I really had to go out and figure that out. And sports was kind of the place where I could go and just kind of be somewhat safe, get to the schoolyard or the JCC where I played a lot of my sports as a young kid. And I think the real transition for me was my mother made me go to a pass-fail high school, non-competitive. That's how competitive I am. So she was very smart. And you had to apply to go to the school. It was John Dewey High School in Coney Island. And it was a pass-fail school, non-competitive, no sports. Because I would have been like Rudy, no talent, but I would have killed myself to make that coach, pick me as the last guy on the team. But there's no way. I had no, I am a mediocre athlete. I could play sports, but definitely it wasn't like you ever want to pick me first on your team. But the real transition for me is when I went to college. I went to Syracuse, as you know, and I lived with a college Division I football player for 2 years. And that's what really got my interest about sports from a business standpoint, and really seeing what the professional athlete, the college athlete was going into. And also living with a player of color too. In Brooklyn, we didn't see a whole lot of people of color. They weren't allowed in the neighborhood. If somebody of color came in our neighborhood, usually meant that they wanted to fight. It was going to be a brawl. It was crazy, the tension. But to go and live with a black person, a black football player, was eye-opening. It's like, so that was a great learning experience, as well as Division I starting running back. That it was just to understand the pressures of playing in front of big crowds and all the things that the school would need them to do. And that's really what led me to starting the sports business. Was Joe Morris, who was the running back with my roommate. And I went to go and see him in Super Bowl 21. In Pasadena was my first sports big game. And we were in his hotel room. There's a stack of messages. Johnny Carson, David Letterman. I'm like, who's returning all these calls, Joe? He said, I don't know. I got no time. I got to focus on the game. I said, listen, I could do that for you. Maybe we can make some money. And that's when I really saw the opportunity. And you got to remember, back in the early, mid 80s, there weren't a lot of people marketing players. It was a very, very small part of the business. And athletes were not really marketed all that well. You had a couple big names that did some stuff. So the market was very, very, it was just very much in its infancy. Sports marketing in general was in its infancy. So I just happened to get into it at the right time. And that's kind of how my story goes. I grew up with a mom who was incredibly entrepreneurial. So you mentioned my book, You Gotta Have Balls. And she was that was her favorite line. You gotta have balls, which is being relentless. I think it's a big part of entrepreneurism, is not only being relentless, but also having a lot of compassion, having a lot of empathy. And most importantly, not stopping at success, but, not settling for just doing pretty good. My mother was always somebody who said, you could do more, you could do better. There's so much more, you could do anything. And I think it's such an important lesson for your parenting, to make sure your kids know that they can be and do anything. And same thing with your employees, is to make sure that they know, even though you're on their ass, you're on their case, is to make sure they know that you're behind them. They can be and do anything at your company and take your company to another level.
So interesting. You're a legend in what you do, and you should be proud of it. And to go back to having a disability, what I just learned from you is the disability pushed you into something that you could feel comfortable, which was sports, right? So that's something that you felt natural, comfortable. It sort of took your head out of it. But you're not, on a sports team, playing basketball, football as a quarterback or a starter here, right? No. You are in business. So how did you get, all these stories that I learned? Most of the successes came from that triumph of what they were not comfortable in, what they felt they were a failure at, which you're saying you had disability. So how did you bust through that? Because in business, you need all that acumen, right? To become successful. So how did you bust through it?
And it's not easy. I mean, first of all, you have to realize some of your limitations. A lot of times you want to take your best and always make it better. And I always had a lot of energy, always had a hustle. And what I've learned is, and I'll tell you a quick story, is when I was 12 years old, I went to my mom and I wanted to get a career change. And because I've already been working for 2 years on the street, and I wanted to play more sports and hang out with my friends. And all my jobs were after school and on Saturdays. So I went and got a paper route. And that sounds like a lot of people maybe got a paper route back in the day, but I had 29 dailies and 34 Sundays. And this was really the whole thing that I think was a game changer for me. So you can win a box of candy bars. Whoever opens up the most accounts, you win a box of candy bars. Now that would be like, that was a grand slam. I go home with a box of candy bars. Are you kidding me? We had so little food and so little money to bring a full box of candy bars home would have been huge. So I'm knocking on doors, nothing. Finally, I knocked on this like older woman. She's probably got to be like 80 years old. And I said, "Ma'am, would you like the paper delivered?" So she had a stack of papers in her house. And she's like, "No, I don't want to get the paper delivered." I said, "Yeah, but," she says, "Yeah, but I get it from the corner store." I said, "But it's the same price, me as the corner store." She says, "Yeah, but then I got to tip you." So I go home and I'm just bitching. I'm like, "Mom, can you believe this? We got to move out of this neighborhood." And the excuse, we got to move out. The people are cheap. And I've been knocking on doors in all these apartment buildings for like a week, and I hadn't had any luck, Jonathan. It was really tough. And I was starting to get really frustrated. And my mother said, "Sit down. I'm going to tell you something right now. You got to stop selling. You got to be a solution-based business person. You got to start solving, and you got to start serving. What can you do to differentiate yourself? You can't expect to sell the same thing someone else is selling and expect them just to buy it. You got to differentiate yourself, and you got to be a solution-based business person." Now, I was trying to get my arms around it. So I go back and I'm knocking on doors, and literally a Thursday night at 10 at night, I knock on this lady's door, and the woman thought there was like a fire. And sure enough, I said, "Man, would you get the paper delivered?" She said, "I told you, son, I don't want to get the paper delivered. Are you crazy knocking on my door this late?" I said, "Just give me 1 minute." I said, "Torrential downpour, snowstorm, heat wave, ice on the ground. Blizzard. These terrible weather conditions would not be good for you to go outside and get the paper. But if I bring you bagels and milk on Wednesday and Sunday, and if you need something else, I'll get it for you, but I'll never be late for the paper. I'll always be there before 7:30. She says, "You would do that for me?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "Yeah, I would do that for you." That is so sweet. So she signed me up. But I didn't know she was the mother lode. She was the mayor of the neighborhood, Jonathan. So I went from 29 dailies to 199 dailies, 234 Sundays. She turned me on to everyone. I was delivering more milk and bagels than you could ever imagine. And I've been telling this story for a long time, and I've told this story to a lot of groups over the course of the years, because value proposition and really listening to your customers and understanding what your customers need is everything. But what I've realized in the last year or two is that that's only part of the story. The real story, what really jump-started me, was as a 12-year-old, I was able to have the kind of empathy and compassion, which is what real true entrepreneurism is. And if you really want to be a disruptor, you got to get out of your head and start putting yourself in someone else's shoes. So the definition of empathy is putting yourself in someone else's shoes and understanding that. That's empathy. As a 12-year-old, I was able to get myself in an 80-year-old woman's head, living in an apartment building's head. And I was able to figure out what she needed, what problems she needed to solve, how to serve her. And what's amazing to me is that I never looked back from that day on, because I've always been a problem solver, someone who's not afraid to serve, and a solution-based business person. And that's like incredible for a 12-year-old to kind of take on that kind of thinking, because we all know when we have young kids, most young kids, 99.9% of the time, think about themselves. And the other 10th of a point, they think about themselves. So, a 12-year-old to stop and think about what it's like to be an 80-year-old woman and those adverse conditions is really the key to being a great entrepreneur. So, for me, everything I always approached in business was about serving, solving, and also about having a high level of compassion and empathy, which is just a high level of common sense. So I took my external distraction, my inability of my ADHD, which is an inability to really lock in and focus. And I took that external distraction and turned it into empathy and compassion. And I raised the level of my common sense, which is just thinking about what it's like for other people to be in their shoes and what they would need and how I could solve a problem for them. And that's how I really eventually built up a whole bunch of different businesses along the way. And that's how I came up with the collectibles and sports marketing stuff that I've been doing for the last 35 years.
First of all, I love your mom. I mean, what an amazing woman. She knew exactly what to say to get you motivated, like a coach, like everything, like a mentor, which is what we all need.
And it wasn't a soft shoulder, by the way. You know, for all you parents out there that want to make everything right for your kids, sometimes trying to make everything right is really making everything wrong. Because helping your kids and enabling them to do everything easily does not make it better for them in the long run. And telling your kids the brutal truth is always a good starting point, even if it doesn't always sit well with them. Because eventually they're going to go out in the world and have to deal with the brutal truth. My mother was never a soft shoulder to cry on. Never. And, I always say the truth will set you free. However, it'll piss you off first.
No doubt. You created DoorDash without knowing it. Too bad you weren't a coding engineer at that point. You would have had DoorDash. You would have been, maybe we wouldn't even be speaking right now.
I remember going to my mom and saying, I got this great idea. I'm going to get a van. I'm going to cut out the side. I'm going to put a big bagel on the top of the van. And on the weekends, I was going to go up and down the street with different versions of cream cheese and lox and then bagels, so people don't have to go all the way to the bagel store. And my mother's immediate reaction was like that idea. You're 13 years old. You don't have a license. You can't drive. And that's not going to work. But that was how my brain was thinking. Imagine going up and down. It's crazy.
Well, listen, solutions are why adding value is the only reason why any of us get paid, make any success whatsoever. So, and what's also interesting, because I believe that if you live in your character traits, like you said, mine was curiosity. Like I'm happiest when I'm curious, when I'm most curious, when I'm asking questions, when I'm learning. You found your character traits at a really early age. You said empathy, and I'm sure if you took a test, I don't know if you've ever taken one, you would see them lined up front. And I could even see when you're talking about those traits, how you light up even more than you're always lit up. But I think that's just very interesting.
Well, thank you. Remember, value, the definition of value is what you could do for someone that they can't do for themselves. I think that you bring up a great point, Jonathan. It's I don't think we talk enough about value as a business proposition, that most people aren't thinking about what they can do for your customer, whether it be product-wise, service-wise, that they can't do for themselves. But the companies that provide great value, you see them just rocking and rolling. And you look at Amazon, you look at Apple, they just provide tremendous value. And those are just a lot of things that we just really can't do better than what they're doing for us. And that's usually relationships you have with those kinds of companies and people, you're not getting rid of so fast.
So values, let's morph into Brandon of almost today and beyond, right? Because I think with you, it's never over. It's always something happening that's going to be, I think, always exciting and amazing. So, we know you started your business with $4,000 in a garage, and obviously we saw the success of that throughout the years, including this Yankee Stadium deal, which maybe you could take a couple seconds to talk about. First of all, why the hell would you ever want to do that? And how did it come about where you sold the old Yankee Stadium all the way down to the dirt on the field? I mean, it's who even thought of that?
Well, it was interesting. First of all, working with the Yankees is just a blessing, and they are the real deal. So, it took me 2 years to work on that original deal that was going to change probably the collectible business in a lot of ways forever, which was, Yankee Steiner at the time. And in the last minute, I had turned to Randy Levine and Lon Trost and said, by the way, we didn't say anything in the contract about this, but if you ever took the stadium down and built a new stadium, which I had no idea that was ever going to happen, I got to be involved with taking it down, because I just felt that stadium was, one of the greatest stadiums maybe of all time when you look at the history and everything else. And I think that it's really important from a business standpoint, when you want to move forward, when you want to take your company ahead, you always have to show respect and own up to the past. And I think a lot of times businesses will change direction, change their logo, build a new stadium, whatever it is. But if you don't respect your past and have gratitude for your past, then it's much harder to go forward. And what I love about the Yankees, when I went to them with this, they promised me that they would get me involved if they ever took the stadium down. But not only did they live up to the promise, but they really got in with me to help me sell off that stadium the way I wanted to, which was piece by piece, hundreds of thousands of pieces, where most other people just wanted to sell the more valuable assets. To me, I wanted to have every Yankee fan have a little piece of something from what I consider to be one of the more memorable places, stadiums, and certainly had its fair share of moments. So I love that the Yankees saw that vision with me and supported that vision because they respected what happened in the past, even though they were, in deep into this new stadium. Obviously, it's an amazing place. And they were deep into moving ahead into a completely different level of what a stadium experience would be. But they still showed the respect for the past. And I think it's so important that we do that in our lives is, you want to move forward, be grateful for what you've had in the past and own up and settle up with it. And that's exactly what I did with the stadium. And I had a lot of fun doing it. It was a labor of love, and there was thousands of things and players and former players and celebs, but I'm so glad that the stuff is sprinkled all over the world and I was a part of it.
Yeah. And listen, you said you took it on. I know we've had these discussions before, and it wasn't an easy task. And it was probably harder than you thought and more time consuming than you thought. But, people look at those things as if they're the top of the mountain. Tell me what went wrong during that and where did it take you from there?
Everything went wrong right from the beginning because, the city was in a little political dilemma. So the controller wanted a lot more money than we wanted to give them. It was right near a train, the L train. So anytime you took anything down or moved anything, that was a problem because you had to follow certain provisions. The frieze on the top of the stadium, which is the first thing I wanted to grab that the Yankee Stadium is known from, that facade. Those things weighed tons and they were way too big and nobody could bring that home. So I spent a lot of money pulling that down with cranes and it ended up being a disaster. We took the seats out and we needed to be lead abated. There was lead in the paint, so all the seats had to be baked and all the lead had to be abated. That was a whole thing in itself. Then we had the seats stored up at Syracuse. And then one of the employees there, the arms were made out of cast iron. And sure enough, he decided that, I think he had a drug problem and he started melting down the cast iron arms to get money. And so we ended up in a big insurance claim. We lost, I think, almost half of the seats because we didn't have the arms.
Unbelievable.
So, we had our fair share of problems. It was a big undertaking. Maybe one of the bigger ones I've ever taken on. A lot of sleepless nights, just trying to be creative. Getting the players the stuff that they wanted, which is always an argument. Probably my first disruption with my Derek Jeter relationship is he wanted his locker and some things. And, we had a lot of money. We just couldn't just give him his locker. So that was a problem. Just a lot of little things.
So what looked interesting was a lot of problems, but you got through it. And I guess I'm saying that because, we read these stories about all these icons and things that go on in our lives and around us. And it's never the real story, right? What fascinates me, it's always what you had to overcome to make it what it was. And to now shoot forward, which I think is interesting, you're starting 2 new ventures. First of all, why? And how did it end up getting to that point? You had Steiner Sports, it was going well, and here you are now all of a sudden almost starting, from scratch again.
Yeah, Steiner Sports was going okay. Certainly, I was always pushing, but, I was with a big company at the time that had bought me in 2000, and I was a fish out of water there. I wasn't really a good fit at that point. And that's always a problem when your parents are not together with you on the same page, as anybody knows that feeling. So, I wasn't really an expert at buying and selling companies. So buying my company back under the conditions that it was in from the back end and everything else became problematic. And, I got, as it turned out, I even spending 2.5 years trying to buy the company back, it was too complicated. And a competitor came in and did a hostile takeover and really just threw me out, which was really devastating, frankly, to lose my name and lose what I had built for 30 plus years. I wasn't too happy about it. But as it turned out, and I knew it even when it was happening, it would probably be the best thing ever because I had this new idea that I thought would be much better than Steiner, even though I love Steiner and everything it did and created, the experiences, and really just developing and building an industry and changing the way people viewed it, all these different autographs and stuff. I had a much bigger and different idea, and I probably would have been hard to execute if I had Steiner, because people just were so used to the way we did things at Steiner. And my vision was always, especially with people getting older, there are more people over the age of 60 now than ever since the beginning of time, Jonathan. So I knew that people are going to start liquidating. And there's nobody that's more collectors, savers than the baby boomer generation. So as this baby boomer generation is getting older and also trying to downsize or at least organize their assets and everything, the collectibles now starting to be 7-figure collections, kind of like art collections. So I knew that I needed to create a platform for them to be able to sell and liquidate their stuff, or just be able to sell one thing, buy another. And I thought eBay did a horrible job. So my goal was, the problem I was trying to solve was create a really cool collectible marketplace that'd be the best in the world, and be able to take collectibles from all over the world and have it all in one safe place that was able to help monitor, manage, verify, authenticate, and do all the different things that make people nervous about buying collectibles. So, I, after licking some of my wounds, and it was a little bit of a down period because I didn't see the hostile takeover. I really was in the process of literally buying my company back. I just got right to work, which seemed very comfortable for me to go start this new platform, which was CollectibleXchange. And the other thing I wanted to do was I always wanted to partner with the athletes, not buy them low, sell them high. And it was this little distrust I had with them, where, you're buying a player and then all of a sudden they blow up and not do well. I end up losing money. You buy a player low and he'd all of a sudden be an MVP and he was getting underpaid. And there was always that tension with me and a lot of the players. And I just figured, let me build a platform for the players so they could sell their own stuff, make most of the money, and use my experience and guidance to help them do it. And that's what Athlete Direct is. So I think we have about 75 players now on the site, with more coming. And it's great. I mean, it's me partnering with the player as opposed to, they dictate and I help them, I guide them the pricing and what they want to sell. And we have there's another thing I've wanted to do. So I got on my list of all the things I've wanted to do. And then I came up with another list of what was stopping me. And then with the new company, there was nothing stopping me.
All right, so let's talk about that. Let's talk about the stop. See, that's where I wanted to get to with this, because again, this sounds all great, but you lost your name, you lost your company, right? You're 30 years in an industry that has built a name up that's legendary. And then here you are the next day with, oh my God, what do I do next? And talk about that list, because I think that's where I think most people either, move on or don't, which is that moment of feeling sorry for yourself, and this is not fair. Why did this happen to me? Like I'm a personally believer life happens for you. You just got to figure out what that for you means. So talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think the best, and really, I've had every quote sent to me after that's happened about, but the best one was, sometimes you got to blow up what you have in order to make room for something new. And I think that's kind of the case. I think when I go up to the white pearly gates and ask God, why the hell did he take that Steiner thing away from me? He's like, well, I gave you an opportunity for you to buy it back, this, that, and everything else. And it doesn't seem like you were going to make that happen. So I had to just blow the whole thing up. It's the only way I was going to get you to do something more important and something more relevant, which I think, what I'm doing now is, and also the challenge of building something. I've always loved building stuff. And I think it was very difficult when you get kind of sideswiped and when something in life occurs that you feel is unfair. But if you can look past it, first of all, settle up on the past. I had a great epic run. There's nobody that's ever going to do what I did in 33 years. It's not going to happen. Started a company with $4,000, built a $50, $60 million company, 25, 30 million autographs secured. I mean, Muhammad Ali, Jeter, you just go on with the list. But, it was time to do something else. And I was a little bored with that. As crazy as that sounds, I wasn't that happy. I wasn't feeling motivated. And I felt like, I made a lot of money. I was working for a big company that really wasn't feeling me. And I needed a change. I just didn't know how to do it. I didn't know how to do it. So somebody else helped me do it. And it could be frustrating. And you got to kind of resolve because at the end of the day, being angry and being pissed off, it ain't going to help you. It's not going to get you anywhere. So I think this new opportunity has been incredibly challenging, starting from square one again, just logo, stationery, renting a space. There's so many things that just bring me back to I feel like I'm 20 years old again. So
I love that statement. I love this statement. They helped you do this. Because like when you're going through it, you're feeling like the world's, pounding you down, yet you look back now and it happened exactly the way it should be. And I can just tell by the energy now how happy you are, right? Because but you had to get through it.
Days it's hard to get out of bed, when you have something like that happen to you, especially 33 years of working on a brand. There's nobody worked harder on their brand than I did. And to have that just taken away in a moment, it took me a while. I mean, it was definitely a period of time of a little depression and trying to organize. But I knew that this was going to be the best thing for me. As crazy as that sounds, I knew that this was a gift, and it wasn't a sentence. It wasn't a punishment. So, look, I've been really blessed to work with some of the. First of all, I got hundreds of emails from people thanking me. I don't know the last time I ever sent an email to a CEO thanking them for running a business, and I'm sorry they're not going to be with there anymore. I mean, hundreds of emails from fans just thanking for the experience. I was a very hands-on CEO. What people thought and how people felt made a difference to me. I love the size of my business. I wasn't trying to do some stuff that even disconnected me with my customers. I love the connection I had with my customers. And I think that sometimes a lot of CEOs forget that, is that, your connection to your customers is really important. And I think a lot of CEOs, sometimes they hide in that corner office and they're afraid of the feedback and the interaction. And I was the opposite. So as it turned out, it ended up being a real boost because I have a really good base of people that are behind me. They want to see me do well and know that where my heart is and know that they have this connection to me. So I'm really, really grateful for that.
It's awesome. Listen, it sounds like you're living on purpose, just like your book, right? Like you're letting it happen and you're flowing.
I had to read the book over. I'm not kidding. Like I took the book out. I said, Brandon, you know something? You now got to go live by your principles that you're telling everybody else to live by.
Exactly.
And I even went back to my first book and started, really reading the first book, which I love the first book for people that are just getting started from entrepreneurs, the business playbook. And I'm literally doing a lot of the same principles that I started, back in the late 80s.
So how can people learn more about Collectibles Exchange? How can they follow you? The
I'm
audience
a big LinkedIn
would like to know.
guy. Like I love when people message me on LinkedIn. It's a little more of a business platform. You can always like me on Facebook. I mean, I have a very active Facebook page. You can find out more about me on brandonsteiner.com. But also, you go to CollectibleXchange, you'll see it's really amazing now. It's 150,000 items on there and growing. And this is a company that's only started a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. And I really feel like I'm on something special to, get people to collaborate. So if you go on CollectibleXchange, you'll see an Athlete Direct. You'll see it's a very unique site with a lot of weird, unique products that the way I always envisioned it was going to be.
Yeah, I suggest everybody do it. It's fascinating and you're fascinating. And I want to thank you so much for doing this. Being my first podcast guest is very exciting to me and I appreciate it. I want to thank everyone who will listen and going to listen in the future. We're going to have a lot of great guests to come. And I look forward to seeing everyone soon. Thank you.
Man, the hell with that, Jonathan. Like and share this thing. Review it below. Get behind this podcast so that Jonathan doesn't have to spend all his waking moments building up the audience. Like and share, baby.
There you go. Like and share. All right. Thank you very much. Take care, Brandon.
Thank you very much. Take care.